Okay, we're live. Hi, Deon. Welcome to Venture with Grace.
What's up, Grace? Thanks so much for having me.
Okay, to start the show, I would love for the audience to learn more about you. So you have worked at Facebook, Palantir, and like a lot of like tech giants, as well as like Pure Storage and like other tech companies. So in general, like to start the show, I would love for the audience to learn more about like what are some core lessons that you've learned from these like working at other companies that you took to start your own company.
Yeah, awesome. So yeah, for me, starting a company, focusing on AI and customer experience. In many ways, when I look back, it goes back pretty far for me. So prior to working at a lot of these companies, I actually, so my background, I grew up in Toronto, in Canada.
Mhm.
I actually interned at AMI, which is the Alberta Machine Intelligence Institute, one of the top 4 AI labs in Canada. Learned AI there, and then also at Waterloo. Interned at a few of the big tech giants, and then eventually graduated, moved out to the Bay Area, and worked for them. Two lessons, actually, a few lessons I've learned. One, I've kind of like watched the CEOs of all these companies, and learned lessons from every single great entrepreneur I've had the opportunity to work with, work for, work in the company of. So people like Drew Houston and Mark Zuckerberg, as they were building companies like Dropbox and Meta, just seeing how they focus on, for example, like talent is always the most important thing. Like putting the right people into the right roles is always critical. And then focusing on being product led, right? Like focusing on always thinking about what problem are you solving for your customers and beyond. And then I think the last lesson that I learned this at Pure Storage, was customers first. One of the things that Pure was really, really good at, and it's still great at today, is focusing on their customer experience, right? So it's not just about building a great technology company, but it's ultimately about driving value for your customers, both with the product and with the entire experience. And it was those lessons that really stuck with me when I was thinking about building an AI company, and building an AI company in customer experience and support. So eventually, when I founded Forethought, a lot of those lessons and learnings I've taken with me for sure.
Totally. Okay. So I want to discuss a little bit more about the product in case people are like first time hearing about it. So like I know that you guys are doing customer service. Like can you unpack a little bit like about like how the customer service industry works and prior to you creating your company, and like what is it, how does it change in terms of like adding AI to it?
Yes. So we are building at Forethought the most advanced generative AI agent for customer support. So in customer service, what ends up happening is, if you kind of zoom out 10,000 feet, you're building a product, or you're building a team, you're building a service, serving your customers. Inevitably, something goes wrong, and the customer service department and org becomes that front line. They're there fielding questions, figuring out what's going on, feeding that insight back to the product team and the remainder of the company. And they're often that kind of first line of defense when something goes wrong with your customers. Prior to Forethought, and prior to this Gen AI boom in general, a lot of customer experience leaders realize that they need to scale their team, but they don't want to do that by throwing money at the problem, or throwing
Mhm.
bodies at the problem, or whatever. And so this gave birth to this whole industry around customer support automation. And customer support automation traditionally has been done through chatbots.
Mhm.
And although the word AI has been thrown around for probably a decade or two, most chatbots in the past were not AI. They were a little bit more artificial than intelligent. It's kind of, think about like when you dial in and you call in customer support, and you get those little phone trees that are like, press 1 for billing, press 2 for password resets or whatever. That's what the state of the art in chatbot technology was for a few decades. Actually, it was that, but in chat form, right? You have these buttons, you have these decision trees, you have these rules and keywords, and ultimately they were scripts. So it felt like you were dealing with a robot, and they were automating things, but the customer experience was horrible, right? And
Mhm.
so a lot of this technology forced people to have this trade-off between, hey, can I automate things at scale, and can I have an actually good customer experience? And oftentimes those two goals were at odds with each other, which is why everyone hates chatbots. Like universal, you talk to anyone, they've probably had a bad experience with a chatbot. And so in 2018, when we launched, leading from my background in AI, my co-founder Sammy's background in AI, and some of the research we were doing with folks like Chris Banning, we we decided that, hey, there's this new technology around, transformers. So that's the predecessor to GPT. The T in GPT stands for transformer. And we were always interested in leveraging this kind of technology for question answering and information retrieval or retrieval. And so we thought that, hey, you could actually build state-of-the-art AI that can go and kind of replace all of these dumb decision tree rules-based chatbots with something smarter. And that was the thesis on which we built Forethought. And then the other thesis was, hey, and you can do this by ingesting all of a company's data and then using that to train the bot and train the model. And so, fast forward 6 years, we built a lot of technology. We started leveraging GPT-2 back in 2019. The Gen AI boom kicks off in 2022 with GPT 3.5, ChatGPT, GPT-4. And we've continued to innovate, both leveraging the state-of-the-art models like GPT-4, Claude, and others, but also building our own engine for what we call question understanding, answer generation, and ultimately what is now we call agentic reasoning, which we can talk about. So building this entire really cool stack that now allows you to have an amazing customer experience with automation.
Totally. Let's talk about agentic reasoning. So from like my understanding, it kind of means like AI creating prompts for AI to do. Um, so maybe I'm like too simplifying
No,
this
that's actually
concept.
pretty accurate.
Uh, but like I wonder like how are you thinking about leveraging it to your business? And then nowadays, like I feel like a lot of like basically every company is becoming an AI business. Like how are you planning on differentiating your company versus like other AI agent company that are solving customer solution issues? And then so for a regular person, when we're thinking about customer solution, people may just think about like, oh, I'm chatting with Amazon asking for a refund, that's AI. But like what are something that like maybe surprise the audience that like, this is actually a part of customer solution,
Yeah.
and like our customer like experience in general.
Yeah. So I think one of the biggest surprises that most people will have is that since ChatGPT and this kind of general Gen AI boom, a lot of vendors, a lot of people, a lot of products have been racing to leverage a technology called RAG, Retrieval
Mhm.
Augmented Generation,
Mhm.
which basically means taking GPT and then wrapping it and then applying it to your public knowledge base. And so what's happening is there's this influx of technology and vendors that can do that. And that's actually becoming table stakes. So, let's use an example like, hey, I need to reset my password, right? Let's say you're talking to kind of one of these RAG-based chatbots and you're like, I want to reset my password. Well, a retrieval engine or a RAG engine will take your question, basically feed it to ChatGPT and find and apply it to the knowledge base. And so it'll be able to answer in kind of a nice, smooth way and say, here are the 5 steps to resetting your password. Good luck. And that can help. That can actually help, 10, 20% of cases. Somebody is like, oh, cool, I didn't know the steps to resetting my password. I'm going to go now back into the app and do all this stuff, reset my password. Thanks for at least pointing me in the right direction. But what's happening is most people think that is AI, and that is the only thing that exists in AI because people's first interaction with AI is through ChatGPT. So this feels like, it's kind of like a ChatGPT, but for your website. It turns out that in the customer experience, if you want to go from getting 10 to 20% automation or resolution on an AI, and you want to go to 60, 70% automation or resolution, which we're seeing in our customers, like, like the Limes and the Asanas and the folks like that, you have to go a step further than just answering a question. You have to take it to taking action, right? So with Forethought, what we do is we actually fine tune a model, our whole pipeline for your business based on your data. That teaches the model to understand and recognize questions, teaches it actually how to answer and resolve issues. But ultimately, we're also connected to your data. We're connected to your databases. So imagine I'm connected to your Airtable or your Shopify or your backend MongoDB database. And then the AI can then go and take action. So imagine instead of, when you ask, hey, I need to reset my password, instead of it going through and telling you, here are the 5 steps, good luck. What if you could have an AI that's like, okay, it sounds like you need to reset your password. I'm hooked into the database here. First, I need to verify that it's you. Sends you a verification or something like that to your email. Great, I verified that it's you. Now I'm going to go in, hit the password reset, and here's your password reset link. Did you receive it? Great, your password's been reset. Carry on. That's the difference between something taking action and something just giving you an answers, right? Like you want resolutions, you don't just want answers. And it turns out, 60 to 70% of cases require some kind of troubleshooting, require some kind of logic, require some kind of reasoning, even refunds, right? You need a refund policy. Has it been within 30 days or has it not been? And all of these things translate into what we call AI agents. That is AI that doesn't just respond based on some knowledge article, but it can make a decision, make a plan. So, hey, I need to do this next. In order to do that, I need this information from the user. It can ask follow-up questions, and it can ultimately take actions, remember the context, and have memory. So that is the core idea behind AI agents versus what is typically called RAG, or retrieval augmented generation. And this technology, even though it's talked about a lot, not a lot of vendors, not a lot of people are actually putting this in place. Last year in September, we at Forethought launched AutoFlows, which is our agentic reasoning engine, trademarked, patented, et cetera. And so super excited to be on the forefront of bringing AI agents to customer experience. It's this really cool technology where you simply just explain to the AI the problem solving approach of how you want it to solve these kinds of issues. And it will go from there and figure out, build a plan on how to actually execute it for your customers. And it's working amazingly.
I wonder, so like since like you guys have like so many different type of clients from different industries, like in the report, like, I kind of seen that like, it seems like construction industry surprisingly is like money spending, and then like actually a lot of it were like um customer service, so like, or like customer success in general. So I wonder, like, how do you quickly define like which category you should go after first?
So when we first went to market, and more recently, we decided on two things, right? Kind of like vertical and horizontal. In terms of size of company, we went after mid market to start. These were companies that were, pre IPO or post IPO. Think your, high scale unicorns, right? And the reason for that is because we know that they have enough scale that driving efficiencies are gonna make an impact on the bottom line, right? You start thinking about things like margins. You start thinking about being able to deliver customer experience at scale at that stage. But they were also small, nimble, and young enough companies, right? These weren't the 50, 100-year-old companies that were like 20,000 employees plus. These were nimble companies that were willing to adopt AI. And, again, pre-GPT boom, this was really, really critical because this new technology, transformers and what is now Gen AI, was something that, people still thought was like black magic, like, oh, I don't think this is going to work. And so going after these companies that had the scale, but also the nimbleness to be early adopters of AI technology was critical. And then within that, we found that the top three segments that we end up going towards are software or internet companies in general, right? So you can think of folks, customers of ours like Lime, like Upwork, like Asana, but then also, folks in retail, e-commerce, right? And then ultimately fintech, finance, and things like that. So we've seen a broad spectrum. And what's really cool is because our models are fine-tuned on your data, they can actually start to pick up a little bit of the vernacular, start to pick up, that base in one company means something different in another company, or a report or whatever. And so it allows us to actually go to market a lot more quickly.
I wonder, since like, for example, if you're working with like multiple different companies in one industry, kind of like fintech or like software technology or retail, for like, let's say if you onboard their competitor and like a bunch of other companies, do you have a set of tools that you would leverage to improve one company's customer experience, or like do you kind of tackle them all together? How do you kind of like train or like fine tuning the model based off each different company? How much resources does that kind of gonna need for your company to um kind of like build tailored solution for each company?
Yeah, it's a great question. So we like to think about it as almost like a layer cake, right? So at the bottommost layer, you have these foundational models, the folks like Claude or GPT-4 or any kind of general language model that's learning on the internet. And then from there, you have the Forethought models, right? So you have our, question encoder, answer encoder, agentic reasoning engine, and these are the things that are applicable across all companies. And then the layer cake on top of that is the fine-tuned version of that for the specific company. And you get a bunch of really, really powerful benefits. So the first thing I will actually say is this puts security, data privacy, things like that at the forefront, right? So we do a lot of really cool things like automatically redact any data that goes into our system, any PII that goes into our system, and things like that, so that all of that data is stored in a secure way. And then we can train and fine-tune models that take the best of the GPTs, then the best of the Forethought models that are trained on the general data, and then fine-tunes that to your industry. And we've gotten that down to a science in a sense where it actually works pretty automatically. So once we integrate into your systems, we'll plug into, imagine, your Zendesk, your Salesforce Service Cloud, or whatever your CRM is. We'll plug into your databases. We'll plug into all of that. And the model trains itself within 24 hours, right? So it's learning all of these things. It's encoding questions, it's encoding answers, and it's building up a reasoning layer. And so it's pretty cool to see. And then we launched a product last year called Discover, which is we usually start pretty much every deployment with this, and it's our insights engine. So immediately, once you've deployed our models, you can start to see a mapping of here are the common topics, automatically generated, automatically clustered, and even here are the ways your agents have been answered those, and these are stored as auto flows or policies. And so it gets really powerful when you can actually start with the data and then use that to actually play back to a business. Here's how your customer support is working today, and here's where you have room for automation with Forethought.
I wonder, so like, would you create, so I guess like, from turning different clients into a part of your business, like, would you charge people based off like how much like per seat, or how do you kind of like structure the business model for each company? So I've seen AI company that does like white glove services for um different type of clients, and then like maybe some are more, some are less. How do you kind of define the business side of things when it comes to creating the business? Also, I want to quickly say hi to the audience. Hi, Dave. Like, we're gonna address your question later, but anyway, please keep going. Sorry.
Yeah, no worries. I saw it was a really great comment about how to replicate human-to-human experience. So we'll jump into that in a bit. But yeah. So in terms of how we think about things, we've always wanted to be a product company, right? And I mentioned this when I was thinking about the companies I used to work for, and that's actually pretty different than many, I would say, AI companies of the last decade. Because you do see a lot of companies claiming to be AI companies, but in a lot of ways, what they'll do is they'll hire a team of ML researchers, and then they'll go into these Fortune 500 companies, and they operate a lot more like a professional services arm. Like, hey, what's your project? What do you want to do with AI? They'll kind of do the Bain route, so to speak.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? And they'll spend like 6 months defining it, hire a team. You're paying basically professional services, and at the end they deploy. And then on the marketing website, they say it's all just AI, right? But really, it's just this custom, supervised learning thing that they've built on for you. By contrast, we've always wanted to be product first, and so all of our technology, all of our products are aimed to be, I wouldn't say single click, but pretty darn fast, right? And so every integration you can do in a self-serve way. The model trains itself, as mentioned, between 8 and 24 hours. You can deploy it as a script on your website. Like, it's actually a tool and a product. And we have our own dashboard where you can go in and deploy this stuff. That being said, like any SaaS company, one of the things we've learned is actually having a professional services, or what we call our implementation engineering team, is actually super helpful. Because not everyone is an expert with writing out an auto flow, which is it's effectively prompt engineering or a prompt for the AI. It's pretty natural, and you can actually write it in any way you want, which means you can still do it yourself. But with great power comes great responsibility, so to speak. So having an implement for an Uncle Ben reference, having an implementation team that can help you and guide you. It's like, okay, I'll take a look at how you've been building these auto flows, make some tweaks here and there, work with you on your data and stuff like that, can actually speed things up. And so at the end of the day, we always want to target between a 3 and 6 week deployment. And that includes, okay, you've trained the model, you've tested it, you've played around with the agent, and you're rolling it out to a small part of your audience and then scaling from there. And that's kind of how we always work with our customers.
I want to touch up a little bit on the AI side of things, or like maybe even the founding AI. Well, maybe we should address Dave's question first because I feel like this is towards the product. So before we move on the conversation into the founding side, um, essentially, like I think he said, like my curiosity is how does a user of such tech finds ways to replicate the human to human experience, no matter how proficient the tech. I don't know if it's ever replaced the warmth of a person in your presence. I feel like I don't know. I feel like as a user, I rather like honestly, like whenever I'm trying to return something on Amazon, it's faster with AI. I kind of like okay, I kind of like the AI side of things better if it's like solving my problem immediately. But I totally get where he's coming from because I feel like that's why people still go to stores to buy like different things because they want like the human interaction. But please address this
Yeah,
on
no,
your own terms.
it's such a good question. I feel like there's like there's factions here. You gotta like, are you AI? Are you human? No. I think so. I think it's a great question. My philosophy is at the end of the day, put the customer first, right, and do what's best for the customer. And oftentimes that means hybrid, and that might be, I don't know if you consider that a cop out answer, but I'll give a direct example here. Sometimes you actually just want your answer quickly, right? Like at
Mhm.
the end of the day, if you can just get your answer resolved, get in, get out, all right, cool. Often that's actually generational, like in the sense of, if you're Gen Z or Gen Alpha is now a thing, um, which I'm still coming to terms with. Or versus, if you're, millennial, Gen Xer, like there's actually, there are different kind of behavior profiles, right? Some people actually want to get on the phone and want to talk to somebody, work through their issue. Some people are like, yeah, I got it. I'm going to be more self-serve. I just need something to get in and out and I'm done. That being said, the beauty of Gen AI these days is that it's starting to become a little bit more human, right? In the sense of, at least in terms of the experience. I think that's what ChatGPT did for the AI world, was that prior to ChatGPT, everything was scripted, everything was robotic, and you could feel it. You're talking to a bot. And nowadays with ChatGPT, because you have a language model that's mimicking human empathy to some degree, it's not necessarily doing it perfectly, but it's mimicking it. You actually get a much smoother experience. And so if you can marry this idea of AI that's modern, that's a little bit more smooth, with humans who are uplifted, so to speak, right? They're not dealing with the simple fast issues, they're dealing with the more complicated issues, they're dealing with the issues that require troubleshooting or human empathy or human judgment. Then you actually get an entire customer experience org that is super, super, super powerful. And these human agents can then become the product experts, right? Driving insights back to the product team. Human agents can become your front line of your upsell team, right? And so it's, if you have an issue, start dealing with the AI, but then when a human comes in, they can actually guide you and help you problem solve and maybe even drive more product and a better revenue and overall experience. So I think if the best companies are going to be doing both, and they're going to be doing both well.
I wonder, like, which part do you feel like should be keep with like within the AI realm, and like which part do you feel like should be human generated? And I wonder, like, so for example, for the three big categories of companies, I'm sure like they probably demand like different type of solutions from like fintech to software to retail ecom. Like how are they differentiated in terms of like the product design aspect for you guys?
Yeah, I like to think about things in terms of like a 2x2 quadrant, so to speak. So imagine like x-axis is complexity, right? So on your left-hand side, you have simple issues. On the right-hand side, you have complex issues. And then I like to think about the y-axis as, I call it activity. But what I mean by that is on the bottom, you have information, things that don't require an action. They just require a resolution. They just require an answer. And then at the top, you have things that require like, I need to go and troubleshoot, or I need to go and do something. And altogether, this kind of creates a 4 quadrant. I wish I had like a visual here, but like imagine that, right? And every business can kind of roughly see themselves as falling into one of these quadrants. You either have simple, information issues like FAQs. You might have complex information issues like, you're dealing with a SaaS product or something like that. Or you might have very simple transactional problems, right? And e-commerce is a good example of that. It's a ton of refunds. It's a ton of where's my order. Once you can fix the transaction, then you can actually automate at scale. And so depending on where your business falls, I like to call this your customer service personality, so to speak, right? Then that kind of dictates the kinds of AI and the recommended solutions I would recommend. For example, the very complex troubleshooting problems often require human agents. And so maybe there you don't need a chatbot. You don't necessarily need an AI agent that's going to respond directly to your customers, but you might need an AI agent that can support your human agents, right? And that's what we typically call agent assist. You might need AI that can classify tickets and get them to the right agent, which we call triage, right? And so there's actually, when you zoom out and think about the entire AI customer support landscape, there are many different kinds of ways you can deploy AI. And we actually use those terms internally at Forethought. We've named our products after them, right? So I mentioned Discover, but that's about insight discovery, then solving the problem or resolving customer problems for the customers, triaging issues, and then assisting agents, right? So Discover, Solve, Triage, Assist. That's actually how we think about and map out the space of products internally. So I think not all AI is created equal. And I think if you have a best-in-class AI platform, it can actually provide the right level of Gen AI across each touch point in that journey of a customer ticket or a customer inquiry, and ultimately tie the loop back so that your users are, for example, teaching or training the bot, right? Like, customer service agent can then become a bot expert or an AI expert or a product expert, right? And I think all of that becomes this virtuous cycle, so to speak, that creates a great business and a great customer experience.
Totally. I wonder, so like I want to chat a little bit more about like how you're thinking about building the product. And right now you guys have a really big team that's like 134 people I checked as on LinkedIn. Maybe it's like more or less. But I wonder when it comes to like building up your product and building your team, can you share a little bit more about like, at the beginning, for example, when you and your co-founder were just starting, how does it look like for you as a CEO to figure out the solution for a problem? So let's think about like if you and I are building like I don't know, like another business tool or like because I want to kind of like get you out of your day-to-day right now because maybe we'll like dive into anyway. So you and I are building some sort of like BDR sales tool. Like maybe this AI thing could help you pull all the right emails from all the right clients, that kind of things. What should be our thought exercise on like building the product? Let's talk about the product first and then we'll talk about the team. Yeah.
Very cool. It's funny you mentioned AI BDR. Shameless plug for one of my friends' companies, Cellscale AI. They're building an AI BDR. So anyway, that's just random. But I do think like AI is actually going to impact every single part of an enterprise, every single part of our kind of human to human interaction as well. But okay, so that aside, let's dive in. We're on the ground. We're building a company. A lot has changed, I would say, in the last couple of years, right? Because when we started, you had to build a lot of these models from scratch. Like if you wanted to build your own transformer model, you'd either have to do research, look up papers that were kind of doing it, or public implementations on GitHub, or you build it yourself in TensorFlow or PyTorch, right? And so some of that becomes a competitive advantage because then you can build a lot of your own models. But I think nowadays, what I advise people to do is like leverage GPT or any language model. And I don't mean it in terms of like use it to write reports or answer questions for you. I mean use the APIs, right? Use the LLM APIs as a computing paradigm. You can now solve problems that would have taken like thousands of lines of code before with like a simple like 4-line prompt. And that should actually be part of the programming model. So that's the first thing, is getting creative about prompt engineering, but using that as part of your actual product engineering. And then from there, you like, from a startup perspective, it doesn't really change in the sense that you're still focusing on putting the customer first. And what I mean by that is, like, if you've ever read Lean Startup or any of those books about how
Mhm.
to start a company from day zero, it's all about getting to your MVP, figuring out what is that core unit of value you can deliver to your customers, and you're solving such a pain point that people are willing to pay for it, even if it's crap. You know what I mean? And I think when you get there, you have a kernel of something great, because you actually have a technology that people want. They don't care if it's fancy, flashy, but it solves the problem. It gets the job done. You know what I mean? And so I think that's how you start thinking about your product, and then you build from there, right? And then there's a lot of ways we could take the discussion on what does that mean, build from there. But I think that's where I would start.
I wonder, so like how do you quickly identify, like, so I guess like whenever I'm thinking about these type of like businesses, I'm constantly thinking about like a marketplace business instead of like a product business, because essentially like for you, you have to think about like building a solution for your customer. You have to land the customer. I guess like that's just like one way. But a lot of the companies I was thinking about are like kind of marketplace businesses. If you and I are building a marketplace business, would you say we need to land the clients first, or would you think like the supply should be first?
Oh, great question. That's actually, it's a scary question, because I think it depends on the dynamics of your market.
Mhm.
Um, I wrote a blog post a very long time ago, but about this idea that in every startup and at any point in your startup, there is always a primary bottleneck or constraint, which I call your startup hard problem. It's like, it's taken from like computer science, the idea of like a NP hard problem, right? Like this, there's problems that are really hard to solve, for machines or for whatever technology. And if you are solving this problem that boils down to it, like an NP hard problem, like give up and work on something else, or change the framing of the problem. And I think the same is true with startups and businesses, actually. Example, like, let's say we're building a social network, and then maybe we can use marketplace in a second. But oftentimes that cold start problem for a social network is the problem. And so imagine you were trying to build like the next Instagram or whatever, and you started imagining this product that is beautiful, has a feed, and millions of people are on it, and they're sharing photos and blah 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 blah. That makes sense if you already have a million people on it. But if you're trying to build that product from day zero, you only have one or 100 people on it at most. And so it's actually that cold start problem of like, what do you do when the feed is empty, is actually the most important problem to solve. So you should almost forget forget the million user version of the app and build a single player version of the app. And I used to study like TikTok, or back in the day when it was called Musically. I worked at Facebook, so I was like thinking about social networks for a long time. Um, and and I realized that like one of the things TikTok actually did well, or Musically did well when it was called that, was they made it very easy for single player. They made really cool editing features so that you could use your thumb, let go, record another thing once you put your thumb back on, and you could have these cut scenes and then add music to it, if you remember the early days of TikTok. And I think that's actually the innovation that allowed it to blow up. It had nothing to do with being a social network. It had everything to do with creator tools. And so in that case, they boosted the supply side, and then demand, you could post that to Instagram or any other social network, and you already had the demand. And so I think similarly can be true depending on the marketplace, right? Let's say you were trying to rebuild, Upwork from scratch. Upwork, Forethought customer, longtime Forethought customer. You have the people doing the work, and you have the people who are paying for the work. And depending on which market dynamic you're in, I'm not an expert on the business, but like, depending on which market you're in, it may be harder to find the people doing the work, or maybe harder to find people with demand. But one of those can often be bootstrapped, or you can leverage an existing distribution channel. So similar to the TikTok, Instagram, or TikTok, Facebook analogy, if you can create more creators, then they can actually post to other websites and bring people back. So that startup hard problem is, how do you bootstrap the creators? But maybe for something like an Upwork, maybe it's actually the demand. Maybe it's, people have so many different places to pay for their contractors or their work. They might not even know that Upwork exists, but there's a ton of work. So sometimes it's one, sometimes it's the other. And I think you can actually apply that thinking, though, to every business. Like, what is my startup hard problem? And for an AI company, ironically, before, for us, it was the technology, because at the time transformers were unproven. And then the second startup hard problem was, can you get anybody to pay for this? Right. And oftentimes that is actually the hard problem. And that's why I say, focus on the customer first. Our very, very first product was janky. It was literally pieces of text. It was like 3 lines of text suggested to an agent that might help them. There was no UI, there was no app, there was no anything, there was no dashboard, no analytics, but it kind of worked. And that was our MVP, and that's what we took to market. And I think you got to think about that in every business.
I wonder, in terms of like client acquisition, I think you guys are killing it. Obviously, you should talk about who your clients are. Like, and then I wonder, how do you quickly acquire a bunch of clients? And then like, is there in certain type of order that you would go after? So for example, let's say fintech first or like software first. Maybe that's like where your network is. And then how do you quickly think about like, what's your personal unfair advantage and the business unfair advantage when it comes to acquire a certain type of clients?
Yeah, great question, and thank you for hyping us up. But yeah, customers, I can talk about some of the customers on our website today. So Lime Scooters, Upwork, I mentioned, Asana, iFit, which is a fitness company, and many others, right? And so, but we work across many industries. We're actually going to be announcing some more interesting stuff in the next couple of weeks, which we'll probably mention a few customers as well. So the boring answer, unfortunately, is that there's no hack. It's like exponential growth always feels flat when you look forward, and like hockey stick, you know what I mean? Like, or sorry, flat when you look in hindsight, hockey stick when you look forward, right? And so, and that's true anywhere on the curve, so to speak. And so, like at the beginning, it's just you find your first customer, however the heck you can, And for us, it was we were selling mid-market, as I mentioned earlier, and so that also gives us some go-to-market advantages, because we can tackle companies that are big enough, but we still can reach. Like, in the early days of a startup, you're a 3-person team, 2-person team. I have no idea how to get to an AT&T, so like I didn't even bother starting there. That being said, some people might have that Rolodex, or some people might have that industry. So some of it boils down to whatever the founder superpowers are, ironically, right? Like if you already are well connected in the Fortune 500s, then you should probably start there. Going back to the marketplace, or even the social network idea, right? Like if you're a college kid starting your first app, and then go and recruit other college kids, right? Like that's probably where you're going to find your first users. And so there's often a little bit of that, of just like find your own unfair advantage, or maybe it's actually a limitation that you can turn into an advantage. And for us, we were starting to get plugged into a lot of these software tech companies. We were VC backed, so we started to raise money, and going and targeting these companies was actually a good place to start. And also, again, like I mentioned before, they were modern, they were willing to get down with AI and try something new. But to finally answer your question, so in general, that's how I think about it. But specifically, we started by hustling. We got our first customer shortly after launching. And then we did a mix of network-based outreach, so leveraging our investors, going and hustling and meeting people, getting embedded into communities. And then over time, we also did a lot of marketing, a lot of like, hey, we're doing something new here, we're doing something different. And there's actually a lot of noise in the market. People think chatbots are AI, people think this is the same as AI. And so in just trying to articulate what was different, we realized we had a unique vantage point and unique point of view in the market. And so we started doing a lot of thought leadership, blogging, explaining the differences. Like even now, right, this difference between RAG and AI agents, most people don't really know. And so being able to just say, hey, like, let's break this down, you know what I mean? That's actually very powerful, because then that allows you to find your next customers, the people who are looking for those things. So I think those are how we mixed it. But you get one customer, then you get 2, then you get 5, and then eventually you're at 100, and so on, right? So that's kind of there's no way to hack it beyond just the doing what you do best.
I wonder, like, how do you batch produce the pipeline for customer? Like, I think like getting one customer or getting two customer, like it seems like unrepeatable. Like they are like a single customer, and then were your sales strategy like, okay, let me pitch to this person, just pitch, or like were you like, hey, can you give us some feedback, and then like slowly onboard them as a design partner slash clients?
It evolved over time, right? So our first startup hard problem was, get one customer. Actually, not even customer. Get one customer to pay us, so it could be a paid pilot. Was our, and we had it like, and I would, after we raised money, I would send out these quarterly investor updates, and I would just put that at the top, like how many paid pilots have we launched today, or this month, or this quarter. And so our first goal was to just get that, because as an engineer, and it was started by me and my co-founder, both tech, engineers, we knew that our biggest failure point would have been building cool tech that nobody wants. And I think that's actually, that kills most startups, before they even launch, right? And so I was like deathly afraid of building cool tech that nobody wants. And so after we built our prototype, our model, right, our transformer-based model that could kind of do the thing, we just spent the rest of our time tackling the market, talking to customers, figuring out, does this work? Is this useful? Would you pay for this? That was always my last question, is like, will you sign up? Will you pay for this? And so Paul Graham from YC often says, do things that don't scale. I still think you still do things that don't scale. Even to this day, there are always some version of that that you do. But and then we were launching a TechCrunch Disrupt in 2018, and we set a goal, 5 paid pilots. We want 5 customers on our logo wall, and that's the only slide that matters. And so we set that as the company goal, and then we ended up getting 6, and we were super excited about that. And then you kind of, from 1 you can get 5, from 5 you can get 20, and so on. But then nowadays at scale, right? Like we're obviously, we're a reasonably established company, still a startup, but like we're a real company now. A lot of that is, traditional SaaS, right? So we have a sales team, we have a BDR team that are reaching out. We're hosting events. We're in the communities. We're doing a lot of marketing. You'll probably see our LinkedIn ads. In fact, I'm sure this will show up as a LinkedIn ad at some point. Like, you know what I mean? And you keep doing the thing, and like you break down the business into like concrete problems, right? And so, how do you get customers? You generate pipeline. How do you generate pipeline? Here are the activities at the top. Here are your MQLs, your SQLs, your demand. From there, can you get opportunities? Can you get demos? Can you close deals? And you playbook the heck out of that, right? So, training and teaching all of your team to the messaging, the story, having a killer demo, all of these pieces to building a business ultimately generate growth and scale at the bottom end.
I wonder, like, so in terms of like, since I feel like I want to I want to maybe jump into like the funding side of it. I think you
Yeah.
guys are really great at fundraising. So I know that at the beginning you had like maybe like an angel investor or something, and then they introduced you to K&I Ventures. I
Yep.
heard actually, like, as like a person who's like very involved with the like the emerging manager category of things, I feel like I heard about them, a lot of good things about them. And then I know that you literally fundraise from like all the top tier investors, like from the NEA, agency or something. Like, so I wonder, how do you tackle the fundraising when you're building something? Maybe I feel like AI was not as popular as it is today. How were you creating the narrative based off what you had? And how do you think about it today? Because today, like every company is an AI company, it's harder to stand out, although there's more funding towards it. How would you go about it today?
Yeah. Great question. I was just processing. I was trying to think back. First of all, shout outs, to K9 Ventures. Manu Kumar is just like a legend. He's on our board. He's just he's like a great business mind. He like thinks like a founder. But he's also a great investor. And then, we were fortunate to raise money also from NEA, New Enterprise Associates. So Pete Sansini, Vanessa Larco are also on our board, and we've worked with them since 2018. So I am, I think I've been maybe lucky, maybe fortunate in the investors I've gotten to work with. But then we've raised from Sound Ventures, Ashton Kutcher and Gaio Series Fund, Operator Collective, Neo, and a bunch of others. So super fortunate about our cap table. Now, I think to answer your question, for me, look, everyone has some superpowers, everyone has weaknesses, right? At the end of the day, right? There's a lot of things I suck at. One of my, I would say, superpowers is thinking about the future of a technology. Like, I get really excited about marrying like a technology that's like 4 or 5 years ahead of our time but also because I am deathly afraid of building something nobody wants, I get really excited
Mhm.
about the applications to real people. And that, like, somewhere in there is all I do. You know what I mean? It's like, where's the future going to be, and where are we today, and how do we have an impact on real humans? And that's been true in every kind of job I've worked at. Has just been like, all right, how do I? Is it? It's always been like something with data, something with the future, but then applying that to real people. And then the other part about that is when you are so excited about technology, you can also think about it as storytelling, right? Storytelling is often just this like nebulous, vague word, but I think about it as a skill, right? As a superpower, the ability to see something that's not yet there, and then bring people along, right? Whether that's your team, investors, customers, potential customers, is part of the game. And for me, it boils down to basically product marketing, right? Like, how do you actually understand
Mhm.
the value proposition? How do you explain it in a way that people get, and bring people along in that journey? And so if you go back to our 2018 TechCrunch Disrupt Battlefield pitch, we were fortunate enough to win that. But we were pitching RAG at the time. It was like, I was literally like, information retrieval embedded into the customer experience, and like with AI and stuff like that. And and so I think we were able to not only see the technology, we were able to build it. A lot of that is actually my co-founder Sammy, who's actually the brains behind the technology, and we were then able to tell the story of where that's going to be and how that's going to come about, and then we executed against that, right? And so I think that was something we've done a good job of, and that job never ends, right? We're now in this space where Gen AI seems like it's this big boom, and it seems like an ending of something, right? It seems like everything has been working up to this, and now you have GPT-4, and everyone's like, all right, cool, like, is that it? AI is here. But the reality is we're still 5 years away from, AGI, and maybe less, actually. I could argue less. But like, a lot of people are just catching up on RAGs now, which we've been pitching since 2018. And we're now pushing the boundary. And we're like, guys, AI agents is the next thing. And it's live, right? We launched autoflows, right? And at the time, people didn't even, AI agents wasn't even in the vocabulary. Now it is, and you're going to see Forethought at the forefront of that. Reinforcement learning is a technology, an approach that's been in research for many, many years. And the lab I worked at Amy in Canada is kind of like well known for reinforcement learning. A lot of technology companies are not yet applying that. We're going to be applying that. In fact, we already are, right? So how do you have self-learning, self-reinforcing auto flows or AI agents that can learn on the fly, right? So there's so many technologies that are still yet to come, and that's how we keep going, right? We got to keep innovating. So today we're this n $1 million company, or whatever you want to call it, and in the future we're going to be an N billion-dollar company. And the way you do that is continuing to innovate, continuing to see the future, try to bring that future a little bit closer, and then bring along your team, your investors, the market, as much as we can. And that's a hard job. Who knows if it's possible, if it's doable? But that's what excites me. That's the most exciting thing about building in this time, being in AI, and being able to just like be an AI builder for customer experience. Like, the future, there's so much more to go. Like I said, it's that exponential curve, and everything up till now has just been flat, and so really, really excited about that.
I wonder, since like 2017 to now, it's been like 7 years. Um, what does your kind of like journey look like as a CEO? I know that you guys started with like two people, and then when it comes to hiring, like how are you thinking about spending? Like, where do you think about splurging? Assuming it's an engineering team, and then where do you think of is like something that you would automate more per se? From, like, a talent perspective.
Yeah. There's a lot of questions rolled into one in that question, by the way, Grace.
I'm sorry. You're
No, it's all
like, I
good.
feel like today I'm, like, going easy here because typically I will have, like, 16 questions in a row, and then people will
All
be like,
just
"Oh my
bang,
god,
bang, bang.
1 star." But anyway.
No, I'm with you. It's fun. So kind of the two questions I teased out there is like, how has the role of the CEO evolved at the company? But then also, as you think about resource allocation, like, where do you lean in, and where do you try and be a little bit more automated? So I'll answer the first question. I've said this on multiple podcasts, but I think like the job is of the CEO is to continually fire yourself. And I say that as almost tongue in cheek, but the point is every 6 to 9 months, if you're growing as a hyperscale company, your role, the company's role, like everything changes rapidly, and that's the point of a startup. That's the only constant of a startup. And so in the early days, it's getting in, writing the code, doing everything you can. Then it's figuring out your customer base. It's figuring out your market, figuring out your marketing messaging, and so on and so forth. And in each of those times, for every 6 to 9 month period, the IC work, the thing that you are uniquely focused on, the thing that is most leveraged, your startup hard problem that I was mentioning before, what is that primary constraint of the business, that changes roughly every 6 to 9 months, probably faster, probably slower, who knows, but that is kind of how it is. And then, so the role of the CEO in my mind has been this to be maniacally focused on whatever it is, whatever it takes to level that company up to the next 6 to 9 months, and obviously to see the future and plan towards the future. But I think you bring the company along in these epics or these sprints. And so in the early days, it was technology, then it was thinking about go to market, and then you kind of somewhere in there you have to reinvent yourself and vision. But then when I say you continuously fire yourself, it's also about finding the best execs or the single best people in the world who can take on that thing, right? And so you may be running go-to-market strategy for a time, but then ultimately you need to figure out who's the best person in the world to take your go-to-market strategy to the next level. And that's actually how you scale, right? And then the more you do that, the more you realize that there's more for the company to do, and there's a new primary constraint, and you have to go and solve for that again. And I think that's kind of that infinite loop, so to speak. Then in terms of resource allocation, we were actually, as you mentioned, we've been lucky and fortunate in our ability to fundraise and our ability to bring investors and our team and customers along into this future that we're hoping to bring about. But as we scaled as a business, we've actually had to get more disciplined about expenses, more disciplined about building a business. Many companies, if you remember the peak, ZERP era from 2020, post-COVID boom, and then 2021, just valuations, money flying around everywhere. Many companies were growth at all costs and had to shift into this mindset of grow at reasonable efficiency, build a real business that can actually allocate resources well. So, in the 6-7 years, we've had to learn through all these ups and down cycles, right? And so I would say very recently, in the last, probably call it 2 to 3 quarters, we've significantly leveled up in terms of our execution. And just I've seen the team just absolutely crushing it. And that's led to record efficiency quarters for us, record growth quarters. The past 2 quarters have been record growth quarters at record low burn multiple, which is a function we measure of how much you spend for every dollar of revenue you gain. LTV to CAC has been through the roof. All of these metrics have just hit amazing levels. And so I'm just super proud of the company, right? Super proud of the team being able to go from, all right, we're growing at all costs, fixing all of the business fundamentals, and then growing even faster, right? And so I love to see that. And I think every company probably in the last year and a half has had to go through that shift, come out stronger, or not come out at all, right? And so I think that's those are the crucible moments, as some of these investors say. And I think it's really true.
Is Forethought your first startup, or is it the 45 idea that you have tried and then you landed on?
Ooh, great question. First official startup, but I would say for probably the 6 months to 6 to 9 months before officially starting Forethought, I had definitely a ton of ideas, right? So, so I started learning about how to build a startup, right? So I read Lean Startup, all the Steve Blank courses, all of the YC Startup School and all of that, right? And then I had a bunch of different ideas, right? I had mentioned I had been in social networks before, and so built, I'm always, at least younger version of Deon is always building something, right? And so the first ever app idea I had was in AI. The idea was build a AI personal tutor, because that was something I wanted when I was in school. And that got me down this rabbit hole of AI question answering, which eventually led to AI question answering for customers. Second idea I ever had was an AI social, no, not AI, sorry, AI is just floating around, a social network around video back in the Instagram days, which was why I was like studying TikTok, which was then called Musically. And so, I'm always building, tinkering, and thinking about these things. And in 2017, when I caught the actual startup bug and I was like, hey, I'm actually going to go start a company here, I had returned back to AI as a concept and AI question answering. And to be frank, I didn't know where I was going to point it. Was I going to go, into the business world? Was I going to do education? Like all these things. And so it was like about 3 to 6 months of refining that before I really landed on, no, there's going to be a big boom in AI for customer service. I've worked in customer service in the past, as stocking shelves at Shoppers Drug Mart. I've seen how companies like Pure Storage differentiate on customer service, and I've seen that the technology is inadequate. Like I think this is going to be it. And so that's kind of the evolution there. But yeah, no, first official startup. But I don't know if you can call it that if I've always been kind of like thinking about business problems my whole life.
I wonder, so like when you first like started out like building the company with your co-founder, I guess like how do you quickly evaluate if this person have like the opposite skill set that you need and would be able to, be a good co-founder? Like how do you kind of like what are some questions or like things that you would ask him to be like, hey, here's like, you know, my vision and stuff like that? So,
Um,
it seems like you guys both worked at Palantir before, and, like, if
yeah,
you want to share a little bit more about, like, what are some things that you kind of, like, see in this person that you feel like would make a good co-founder?
yeah. No, I'm thinking about like co-founder dating is hard. Like it's harder than real dating.
Yeah.
Like, you know what I mean? Like
Yeah, yeah,
you end up basically married to this person that you're going to work with for like 10 plus years if you're successful. Right?
yeah.
Like if you're not, that's true. We're all dead anyway. And so I think I probably the actual answers that I lucked out in that. So Sammy and I met as interns at Palantir, bonded over AI, basketball. He's a huge Kobe fan, and also just like entrepreneurship in general. The like bouncing ideas off each other, like even long before we started Forethought, for years we would bounce ideas off each other because we were both pretty entrepreneurial and just thinking about, hey, like how do you think you could apply data to this problem and that problem, and so we had this like really fun kind of working relationship in general. But then eventually, when we went to start Forethought, again, I think I just lucked out because we're like very different humans, very, very different, but we align on values in the sense that like, well, one, Sammy's probably the smartest, most hardworking person on the planet. So like, just I lucked out just knowing him. But also, we have very different skill sets. Like I'm more of like I mentioned, storytelling as a superpower, being able to think about the intersection between product and business. And Sammy just is, well, he's actually very good at that too. So, that goes without saying. But his superpower is like being able to align a team, um, deliver on the code, and ultimately just like bring the entire company along. Right. And so, and I've literally, I've never seen anything like it. Like, if you ever get a chance to meet my co-founder, Sammy, he's just awesome. And so, like, these two kind of like different personalities worked out really well. Like, I remember TechCrunch Disrupt is probably the first time this like really showed, because we were thinking about our pitch, right? We were figuring out the demo, and little things would come up where we would just like be at each other and just like disagree like vehemently on stuff. I remember like thinking about how to pitch the story, and he'd be like, "Oh, well, let's say this." I'm like, "No, the story doesn't land." And then I also remember when we were thinking about the demo, I was like, "Oh, we can demo this," and he's like, "That just sucks. Like this, I would never show that in public." And so like we were able to just like key off each other, and to the point where like we'd be in a room, we'd ask each other every possible judge FAQ question that the judges could ask us, and we would disagree like again vehemently on everything, and then we would come out and it was golden, and we won TechCrunch Disrupt Battlefield. And I think like that kind of co-founder relationship, that co-founder dynamic really led to that, because I wouldn't have been able to do that without Sammy, and I'd like to think that he wouldn't have been able to do that without me, although again, like he might have actually been able to. but that is kind of how our relationship has evolved, and I think we've taken that throughout the growing of this company to date. So I love that, but I don't know how to replicate that. Is probably what I would say. Like, I don't know how to find a great co-founder beyond just like no Sammy Ghosh's of the world.
Amazing. Okay, so I wanna be mindful of the time, although I have like 400 other questions for you, but we'll end with a 1 minute fire on. Oh, by
Let's
the way,
go.
hi Mustafa. Want to say hi to the audience. Okay,
Woo!
so first question: what's your favorite book?
Oh, it changes. Right now, it's 15 Commitments of Conscious Leadership. That's it.
Wow, you said it so fast.
Yeah, I was like, well, it's a lightning round. Should I explain or should I just say it?
Okay, so
It's a book. It's a book that really helps you think about your own EQ, like how you manage your own emotions, how you manage like processing stories in your head and stuff like that. Which is kind of like, I've done a lot of IQ training, right, through computer science and math, and then that was like a really good book on EQ training.
amazing. Who made the biggest impact in your career?
Sheesh. So many people. Um, I don't know. Right now, the person that comes to mind is Sumit Gadri. He was the former chief strategy officer at Carta. He was one of my early angel investors. He actually introduced us to like K9 and a whole bunch of other people and a bunch of great execs. He's now like at Original Capital. I don't know if that is the answer. I'm sure there's like a string of people, but he's the person who came to mind in this lightning round.
Who would you invite to your dinner party?
How many names do I get?
It's your party.
Um, so my actual answer here is Gwyneth Paltrow.
She's your investor, right?
She
Is
is
your
my investor.
Okay,
Yes,
yeah.
exactly. In her
Oh, okay.
series too.
So yeah, flex. But anyway, keep going. Sorry. Yeah,
Um,
yeah, like there's Austin Kutcher. There's like just like a bunch of celebrities that are your
yeah,
but
yeah, that's a probably a story for another podcast. But Gwyneth is one. She's one of the smartest like business minds I've met.
Mhm.
And she's running this amazing company with Goop, just crushing it. And she's
Mhm.
also one of the kindest, nicest souls in the entire world. Like, she's one of the nicest people. I love her to death. And so literally, yeah. But like anytime, if I if you can have dinner with one person in the world, I would say Gwyneth Paltrow.
Uh, where can we find you outside of work?
I live in the Bay Area with my wife and 2 kids. So probably doing some family stuff. Beyond that, I love to play basketball. And I love to read. I've been on a quantum physics kind of fix lately, just with reading. So anyway, I don't know. You'll probably find me reading, playing
Mhm.
basketball. Oh, or singing karaoke. I forgot. Obviously, I forgot to mention that. We will
Um,
also karaoke.
what would be a song you would sing?
Oh, most recently, "Lay Me Down" by Sam Smith.
Oh
Um,
wow.
yeah, so I'm very into love ballads, like the Adeles, the Ed Sheerans, the like Sam Smith. That's my genre, and then I can go hip hop, like
Okay.
like They Not Like Us, or like Kendrick or Drake. Actually, to be honest, I know a lot of people are going to be upset in the audience about this, but
Well, amazing, Deon. Thank you so much for coming on the show today. It was a fun chat.
likewise, thanks for having me, Grace. This was so much fun, and see you soon.
Okay, see you soon. Let me just quickly end stream. It's ending. It's almost ending.